Hello everyone, here is Afrasyab. Today we are going to solve Cambridge IGCSE Physics Paper 4 Theory Extended, held on October-November 2018 and paper code is 0625 with variant 42. So let's start from question number 1. Question number 1. A lorry is traveling along a straight horizontal road. Figure 1.1 is the distance time graph for the lorry. Here is the figure 1.1 and it's the distance time graph. Distance is measured in meter while the time is measured in second. Part A. Using figure 1.1, determine part first. The speed of the lorry at time t is equal to 30 seconds. Here we have to find out the speed when time equal to 30 seconds. So going back to the graph, we can see here that it's a distance time graph and the slope of distance time graph is speed, or the gradient of distance time graph gives us speed. So I write here speed is equal to gradient or slope of distance time graph. So in the part first, time is given, that is 30 seconds. So 30 seconds will be at this point. So I draw a line here and meet this with x-axis and y-axis. So the distance at this point is 900 meter, and when we have to find out speed, I write here speed is equal to distance divided by time. Here distance at 30 seconds is 900 divided by 30 and it comes to be 30 meter per second. So the speed at time t is equal to 0, t is equal to 30. It is 30 meter per second and this speed remains same whenever there is a straight line between distance and time. So here we can see that it is a straight line up to time t is equal to 60 seconds. It means that from 0 to 60 seconds, any time between these, the speed remains same, that is 30 meter per second. After 60 seconds, there is a curve on the distance time graph. So the speed changes, but at time t is equal to 60 seconds, the speed at every point remains same, that is 30 meter per second. Part B. The average speed of the lorry between time t is equal to 60 seconds and time t is equal to 120 seconds. Here we have to find out the average speed. So average speed will be equal to total change in distance divided by total change in time. Because we have to find out the average speed between two points at time t is equal to 60 and 120 seconds. So going back to the graph, 60 seconds is this point and 120 seconds is this point. So it will meet the curve at this and this point. We join both of these points with time axis and distance axis. So here we can see that at time t is equal to 60 seconds, distance is 1800 meter, and at 120 seconds, this point meets the distance line at 2700 meters. Now I also join this point on time axis. Now we have to find out the average speed between t is equal to 60 and 120 seconds. So I write here when time equal to 60 seconds and when time equal to 120 seconds. Distance here is 1800 meter, while here distance is 2700 meter. These values we have find out from the graph. So the average speed comes to be change in distance, that is 2700 minus 1800 divided by time, that is 120 minus 60. So it will be equal to 900 divided by 60, and it is 15 meter per second. So the average speed is equal to 15 meter per second. Going towards the next part, part B. At time t is equal to 30 seconds, the total resistive force acting on the lorry is 1.4 into 10 to the power 4 Newton. Part 1. Using figure 1.1, determine the magnitude of acceleration of the lorry at t is equal to 30 seconds. So here we have to find out acceleration at t is equal to 30 seconds. Going back to the graph, we can see here that at t is equal to 30 seconds, it's a straight line. Means that here lorry moves with constant speed. I write here it's a constant speed, and when the speed is constant, acceleration will be equal to 0. So acceleration will be equal to 0 at t is equal to 30 seconds. As we can see from this graph that at t is equal to 0 to 60 seconds, it's a straight line. It means that from 0 to 60 seconds, there is a constant speed and acceleration will be equal to 0. So I write here acceleration will be equal to 0 meter per second square. Part 2. Determine the forward force on the lorry due to its engine at time t is equal to 130. So we already calculate that at t is equal to 30 seconds, acceleration is equal to 0 meter per second square. It means that net force will be equal to ma, that is according to Newton's second law of motion, m into 0. So the total force is 0 Newton. But in a statement it is given that the total resistive force is 1.4 into 10 to the power 4 Newton. It means that this net force is sum of two forces. Suppose this point is the lorry and here is the resistive force, and this is forward force. So the magnitude of resistive force is given, that is 1.4 into 10 to the power 4 Newton. I write here resistive force is equal to 1.4 into 10 की power 4 Newton. So total net force is equal to 0. It is only 0 when both of these forces, that is resistive and forward force, have equal magnitude. And we can see that both of these are acting in opposite direction. So we can simply say that forward force will also be equal to 1.4 into 10 की power 4 Newton. So that when I calculate the net force, from this figure we can see that it will be resistive force minus forward force. When I put values here, it is 1.4 into 10 की power 4 minus 1.4 into 10 की power 4. So this cancels by this and the total net force comes to be 0 Newton. So I write here forward force is equal to 1.4 into 10 की power 4 Newton. Next part C. Describe the motion of the lorry between t is equal to 60 seconds and t is equal to 130 seconds. So going back to figure, 60 seconds is at this point and 130 seconds will be at this point. So here we can see that first of all it is just like this curve, and after 120 seconds it is a straight line up to 140 seconds, but we have to discuss only at 130. So from 120 to 130 it is a straight line that is parallel to time axis. So it means that in this region acceleration is equal to 0 and speed is also equal to 0 because lorry is stationary. So from 60 seconds to 120 seconds we can see here the lorry is slowing down, means that it is decelerating. So we can simply say that the lorry had decelerated to stop because from 120 to 130 seconds it stops. It becomes stationary. So I write here the lorry has decelerated to stop. It means that first of all its speed decreases and at the end it stops. Question number 2, part A. Figure 2.1 shows liquid in a cylinder. Here is a figure 2.1 and there is a cylinder that is filled with the liquid. Table 2.1 gives some data about the cylinder and liquid. Here is the table 2.1 and here the radius of cylinder is given, which is 3.5 centimeter. The weight of the empty cylinder is 2.5 Newton. The depth of liquid is 12.0 centimeter and the density of liquid is 900 kilogram per meter cube. The cylinder containing liquid is placed on a digital balance that displays the mass in kilogram. Calculate the reading shown on the balance. Here we have to find out the mass. So first of all, here is some data that is given and we can see in a figure 2.1 that there is a cylinder and also there is a liquid inside this cylinder. So the total mass will be the sum of mass of cylinder plus the mass of liquid. I write here total mass will be equal to mass of cylinder plus mass of liquid. But here we are given other parameter except of mass. It means that we have to find out the mass of liquid and mass of cylinder. So here I write M total will be equal to mass of cylinder plus mass of liquid. First of all, here weight of the empty cylinder is given. From here we can easily calculate the mass of cylinder. I write here weight is equal to, that is the weight of cylinder will be equal to mass of cylinder multiplied by G. Here we have to find the value of mass. It will be equal to weight of cylinder divided by G. Weight is given, that is 2.5 Newton, and the value of G, that is acceleration due to gravity, is 10 meter per second square. So the mass of cylinder comes to be 0.25 kilogram. It is the mass of cylinder. Here we have to find out this term, but we also require the mass of liquid. In order to calculate the mass of liquid, we use formula that density is mass per unit volume, because here the density of liquid is given. So I write here as density is equal to mass per unit volume. By using this formula, the mass of liquid will be equal to density of liquid multiplied by volume. So here volume is basically the product of area and depth. So I write here area into height or depth, both are same things. So here density of liquid is given, that is 900 kilogram per meter cube. So it will be 900 multiply, the area will be pi r square. It will be pi r square. So pi is 3.14 multiplied by the radius. So here the radius will be equal to 3.5 centimeter, and we have to convert this value into meters. So it will be 0.035 square, and I have converted 3.5 centimeter into meters multiplied by height or depth, that is given 12.0 centimeter. So I also have to convert this into meter, and it will be 0.12. After simplification, the mass of liquid comes to be 0.242 kilogram, and using this equation we can find out the total mass. So here I write total mass will be equal to the mass of cylinder, that is 0.25, plus the mass of liquid, that is 0.42. So that the total mass comes to be 0.67 kilogram. So the reading will be equal to 0.67 kilogram. Going towards the next part of this question. Part B. Figure 2.2 shows a device that measures the pressure of gas. So here is a figure 2.2, and this is used to measure the pressure of gas. Part 1. State the name of this device. So it is a manometer that is used to measure the pressure of gas. I write here it is manometer. Part 2. The pressure of the gas is 400 Pascal, greater than atmospheric pressure. Calculate the density of liquid. Here we have to find out the density of liquid. So the pressure due to the liquid will be equal to rho GH, that is the product of density, acceleration due to gravity and height. So here we have to find out the value of density. It will be equal to pressure over acceleration due to gravity and h. So here pressure is 400 divided by 10 multiplied by height. So height is given in this figure that its value is 50 millimeter. So using this value, I write here 50 millimeter. First of all, we have to convert this into meter. So it comes to be 0.05 meter. And density comes to be 800 kilogram per meter cube. So density will be equal to 800 kilogram per meter cube. Part 3. With the gas supply connected, the top of the tube on the left of the device is sealed securely with a rubber stopper. The gas pressure is then increased. State and explain what happened to the liquid in the device. So here the left end of this is sealed with the rubber stopper, and when we increase the gas pressure here, then what will happen? So first of all, when here pressure increase, it means that liquid is pushing in downward direction. So as on the right hand side liquid is pushing in downward direction, on the left hand side it will pull in upward direction. On the left hand side this liquid will pull in upward direction, and this liquid also move upward. So the liquid on left side will be higher because the pressure from the gas supply is higher than the pressure from the liquid at different height plus the atmospheric pressure. So I write here liquid on left will be higher because the pressure from gas supply is larger than pressure from the liquid, at different heights plus pressure due to atmosphere. So that's why the level of liquid on the left side will rise up. Question number 3, part A. The velocity of an object of mass m increases from u to v. So here initial velocity is u while the final velocity is v. I write here initial velocity is represented by u while the final velocity is equal to v. State in terms of mass m, u and v the change of momentum of the object. So first of all, we know that momentum is the product of mass and velocity. I write here P is equal to mv, but here we have to state change of momentum. So delta P will be equal to mv2 minus mv1. Change in momentum means final momentum minus initial momentum. So here final velocity is v. So I write mv minus initial velocity is u. It is mu. So this is a change of momentum in terms of mass, velocities u and v. I write here delta P is equal to mv minus mu. Part B. In a game of tennis, a player hits a stationary ball with his racket. Ball is stationary means that its initial velocity is equal to 0. Part 1. The racket is in contact with the ball for 6.0 milliseconds. The average force on the ball during this time is 400 Newton. Calculate the impulse of the tennis ball. Here we have to calculate impulse. For that we have to know about that what is impulse. So impulse is the product of force and time. We know that according to second law of Newton, F is equal to ma, where acceleration is change in velocity over time. I write here v minus u over t. So it will be F cross t is equal to mv minus mu. This term, that is the product of force and time. This is basically impulse. I write here impulse I is equal to F cross t, and it is also equal to change in momentum delta P. So in this question we are given the value of force and time. So we use this formula that impulse is the product of force and time. So I will be equal to force is 400 multiplied by time is 6.0 millisecond, and we have to convert milliseconds into second. So I multiply it with 10 to the power minus 3, and the value of impulse comes to be 2.4 Newton second. So impulse will be equal to 2.4 Newton second. Part 2. The mass of the ball is 0.056 kilogram. Calculate the speed with which the ball leaves the racket. Here we have to find out the speed with which the ball leaves the racket. So again using this formula that impulse is equal to the change in momentum. So I write here impulse is equal to change in momentum. This is u. But it is given that a player hits the stationary ball. Means that ball is stationary. Its initial velocity is equal to 0. So the impulse will be equal to mv minus m into 0, that is mv. And here we have to find out the speed with which the ball leaves the racket. So v will be equal to I over m, and impulse that we already calculate, it is equal to 2.4 Newton second. 2.4 divided by mass is given, that is 0.056 kilogram. So that the speed comes to be 43 meter per second. So I write here speed is equal to 43 meter per second. Part 3. State the energy transfer that take place first. As the ball changes shape during the contact with the racket and ball. So here is the contact between the racket and ball. It means that all the kinetic energy changes into elastic potential energy. So here energy transferred from kinetic energy to elastic potential energy. Part 2. As the ball leaves the racket. So as the ball leaves the racket, so that all the elastic potential energy changes into kinetic energy, because kinetic energy is the energy possessed by a body due to its motion. So I write here elastic potential energy to kinetic energy. Question number 4. Figure 4.1 shows the apparatus used by a student to measure the specific heat capacity of iron. So here is a figure 4.1 and we can see that here is a apparatus that is used to measure the specific heat capacity of iron, and this apparatus consists of thermometer and electric heater, and third thing is iron block. So the electric heater and thermometer is placed inside the iron block. Part A. The student improves the accuracy of the experiment by placing material around the block as shown in figure 4.2. So in figure 4.1 there is an iron block, and in figure 4.2 we can see here that this block, which is this, and there is a material around this block. So this is a material that is around this block. Part 1. Suggests the name of possible material the student could use and explain how it improves the accuracy of experiment. So first of all we have to tell the name of this material and explain that how the student can improve the accuracy of this experiment. So first of all, this experiment is basically for the measurement of specific heat capacity, and this material should be insulating material like rubber or foam, and here the student can improve the accuracy of the experiment, because when there is an insulating material around the block, then less heat lost to the surrounding, because this material is a good insulator. So less heat lost to surrounding, and the more energy is transferred into the block, so that the student can improve the accuracy of this experiment. So I write here in suggestion insulating material like foam, and in explanation I write less heat loss to surroundings, and more energy is transferred into the block. Going towards the next part of this question. Part 2. State how the student could further improve the accuracy of the experiment by using more of the material used in figure 4.2. So going back to figure, the student further wants to improve the accuracy of this experiment. So what he would do? He again used any insulating material and covered the top of this block with that insulating material. So there will be any insulating material that is placed over the top of this block. So there will be no heat loss to the surrounding. So I write here, put insulation on the top of block. Part B. The current in the heater is 3.8 ampere and the potential difference, that is PD, across it is 12 volt. The iron block has a mass of 2.0 kg. When the heater is switched on for 10 minutes, the temperature of the block rises from 25 degrees C to 55 degrees C. Calculate the specific heat capacity. So here we have to find out the specific heat capacity of iron, where current, potential difference, mass, time and change in temperature is given. So first of all, I write here mass is 2.0 kg, time is 10 minutes, and I convert these minutes into second by multiplying it with 60. It will be 600 seconds. Third thing is potential difference 12 volt and current is 3.8 ampere. Change in temperature, that is delta T, it is 55 minus 25. Final temperature, that is 55 and initial temperature is 25. So it will be equal to 30 degrees C. We know that the formula for the specific heat capacity is E is equal to mc delta T. Here we have to find out the value of C. It will be equal to E over m delta T. Here mass is given, change in temperature is also given and energy is not given, and we have to find out the value of energy. For the calculation of value of energy, we know that power is the rate of transfer of energy. Power is equal to energy over time. So here energy will be equal to power multiplied by time. Power is also not given in the data, but current and potential difference is given. So I write here energy will be equal to, power is basically the product of current and potential difference. I write here I cross V and T. So I put here I V T divided by m delta T. So all of these values are given. So the value of C comes to be, the value of current is 3.8 multiplied by potential difference is 12 volt and time is 600 seconds divided by mass is given 2.0 kg multiplied by change in temperature is 30 degrees C. So the value of C comes to be 460, and we also have to know the unit of specific heat capacity. So from this equation we can see that energy is measured in joule over mass is given in kilogram and temperature is in degree C. So that the specific heat capacity will be equal to 460 joule per kilogram per degree C. Question number 5, part A. Figure 5.1 shows a visible spectrum focused on a screen by passing light from a source of white light through a lens and prism. Here in figure 5.1 we can see that there is a source of white light, and this light first of all passing through the lens and then glass prism, and then it is focused on screen at 2 points A and B. Part first, state the name of process that separate the color in white light. So this phenomena is basically dispersion that is used to separate the color in the white light. I write here it's a dispersion. Part 2, state the color of the light on the screen at point A and point B. So going back to figure 5.1, we can see here that there are 2 points A and B. A is higher while the B is lower point. So white light separate into different color, that is red, orange, yellow, green, blue and violet. So these colors, red has longer wavelength, while the violet has shortest wavelength. So the color that has longer wavelength, that is red, will be at point A, while the violet color will be at point B. I write here is red and here is violet. So I write here at point A, color is red and at point B, it is violet. Part 3, state the property of glass of the prism that causes white light to split into the different colors of the spectrum. So there are different colors in a white light that is given here: red, orange, yellow and green, blue, violet. There are different colors. All of these colors has different wavelength, and these different colors of the light travel at different speed in the glass. So I write here different colors of light travel at different speed in glass. So this property of the glass is that causes the white light to be split into the different colors. Going towards the next part of this question. Here is part B. Figure 5.2 shows a section of an optical fiber in air. A ray of light is incident on the fiber wall at point X. Here is a figure 5.2 and it's an optical fiber, and it is the ray of light that is incident on the optical fiber at point X. Part first. On figure 5.2, continue the path of the ray of light up to the end of fiber. So we have to complete the path of this ray as it enters into the fiber. For that, first of all, I draw a normal at point X. So this is the normal line here. And we know that angle of incidence is the angle that the incident ray made with the normal line. So this is theta I, that is angle of incidence. So there will be the angle of refraction, that is this one. because here ray is reflected, so it will be just like this. So that here it is angle of refraction. Again, this ray goes outside. We again draw a normal in the similar way. Here is a normal, and then this ray will be reflected. And it will be like this. Because it is incident angle and it is the reflected angle. So this is a complete path for the ray of light as it enters the optical fiber. So first of all, I erase all of these normal lines. So this is the path of the light as it enters the optical fiber. It moves in this direction. Part 2. The refractive index of the material of the fiber is 1.46. Calculate the critical angle of the material of the fiber. So here we are given refractive index and we have to find out the critical angle. So we know that sine of critical angle is equal to 1 over n, where n is the refractive index. So here we have to find out the value of C. It will be equal to sine inverse of 1 over n. By putting the value of n, that is the refractive index, it will be 1 over 1.46. So that the critical angle comes to be 43 degrees. I write here critical angle is equal to 43 degrees. Part 3. State two uses of the optical fiber. Here we have to describe two uses of optical fiber. So optical fiber is used in a communication as well as in medical diagnosis. I write here communication. Optical fiber is medical diagnosis. Question number 6. Figure 6.1 represents a sound wave of wavelength 0.45 meters traveling from left to right. So here is a sound wave in figure 6.1 and it is traveling from left to right. Part A. On figure 6.1 first. At the center of a compression, mark a cross and label it with C. For that we have to know about the compression and rarefaction, as the sound wave is longitudinal wave and it comprises of compression and rarefaction. So compression is the region where the particles are closer to each other, while rarefaction is the region where the particles are further apart from each other. I write here compression, particles are closer, and at rarefaction particles further apart. So in figure 6.1 we can see that this is a region where particles are closer. So this region is basically compression. I label it with C. I have to place cross at its center, and this is basically compression and it is represented by C. Part 2. At the center of a rarefaction, mark a cross and label it R. So here is the second portion where the particles are further apart from each other. The distance between them is very large as compared to compression. So this is basically the region where there is a large distance. So it is a rarefaction and we have to place cross at the center. So I will place here cross and label it with R. Part 3. Draw a double-headed arrow to represent a distance of 0.90 meter. So here distance is 0.90 meter, but on figure 6.1 there is no scale. So we can guess from this wavelength that one wavelength is distance that is equal to 0.45 meter. For that we have to know about what is wavelength. So wavelength is a distance between two conjunctive crust and trough. If I start from this point and at this point, here it's a compression and it's also a compression. So the distance between two conjunctive compression is basically the wavelength. So I draw a line here. This distance is basically equal to 0.45 meter, that is given here. Next, in part 3, we have to represent the distance that is equal to 0.90 meter. So what I will do here, that wavelength is equal to 0.45 meter. When I multiply both sides with 2, it will be 0.90 meter. So I just double the wavelength to get a distance of 0.90 meter. So I again consider this compression and the next compression start from this point. So this distance is basically equal to 0.90 meter. And we have to label this with double arrow. Now I erase this one and I write here that this distance is 0.90 meter. Part B. The frequency of the wave is 750 Hz. Calculate the speed of wave. Here we have to calculate speed, that is V. It is equal to f lambda, where f is frequency and lambda is wavelength. So V will be equal to, frequency is given, that is 750 Hz, multiply by wavelength is given in the question and it is 0.45 meter. I write here 0.45, so that the speed of wave comes to be 340 meter per second. I write here speed is equal to 340 meter per second. Part C. Suggest a medium through which the sound wave is traveling and state your reasoning. So in a part B, we have calculated the speed of the wave and it is a sound wave. So the speed of sound wave is 340 meter per second and this speed is basically in the air. So the medium through which the sound wave is traveling is air, and reason is that the speed of sound wave in air is 340 meter per second. I write here medium is air and reason is that speed of sound in air is 340 meter per second. Part D. Another type of wave that consists of compressions and rarefactions is ultrasound. So basically there is a key point that there is a other wave that is ultrasound, and it also comprises of compressions and rarefactions. Part first, state one other similarity between sound of frequency 750 Hz and ultrasound. So first of all, the frequency of wave is given 750 and we have to show the similarity between this wave whose frequency is 750 and the ultrasound wave. So in a part first, it is given that it is a longitudinal wave because it consists of compressions and rarefaction. Ultrasound wave also consists of compressions and rarefaction. So both of these waves are longitudinal. I write here, both are longitudinal wave. Part 2, state one way in which sound of frequency 750 Hz is different from ultrasound. So here we have to describe the difference between sound whose frequency is 750 Hz and ultrasound. So first of all, we have to know the frequency of ultrasound. We know that human ear can respond to the frequency ranges from 20 Hz to 20,000 Hz. And any frequency that is above 20,000 Hz is ultrasound. But here it is given that the sound of frequency 750, this frequency lies in the frequency of human range. That's why it is not ultrasound. So we can simply say that this frequency is below than 20,000 Hz. This is the main difference between them. So I write here, frequency is below 20,000 Hz. Question number 7. Figure 7.1 shows 3 identical lamps and an ammeter connected to a power supply. So here is a figure 7.1 and we can see that there are 3 lamps that are connected in parallel. And there is also ammeter and also a power supply. The switches are closed. Each lamp is rated at 70 watt and operates at its normal working voltage of 110 volt. Part A, calculate the current in each lamp. Here we have to find out the current in each lamp. For that, power is given and potential difference also given, and we have to find out the value of current. I use formula that power is equal to product of current and voltage. Here we have to find out the value of current. It will be equal to P over V. It is given that each lamp is rated at 60 watt, means that power is 60 watt divided by voltage. So each lamp is operate at its normal working voltage of 110. This 110 voltage is actually for each of the lamp. So I divide it with 110 and the value of current comes to be 0.55 ampere. I write current is equal to 0.55 ampere. Part 2, the current in ammeter. Here we have to find out the current in ammeter. For that, going back to circuit, we can see that these lamps are connected in parallel, and in parallel combination, the total current is obtained by adding all of the current. I write here about series and parallel combination. Here is current and here is voltage. So in series combination, current remains same and potential is different. And in parallel combination, current is different while potential difference remains same. By using this concept, we can see here these lamps are parallel. That's why the potential across each of the lamp is 110. But the current that we calculate in each of the lamp is 0.55. That is calculated in part 1. And we have to calculate the total current. So, in parallel combination, current is different. The total current is obtained by adding all of the current. If I consider that across this lamp current is I1, here it is I2 and it is I3. So I add all of these current to get the total current. So I use this formula here. I will be equal to I1 plus I2 plus I3. It will be 0.55 plus 0.55 plus 0.55. So that the total current comes to be 1.6 ampere. So this is a current that is in the ammeter. So it will be 1.6 ampere. Part 3. The voltage of the power supply. So going back here, we can see that in the parallel combination potential is same. Or I can simply write it as V is equal to V1 is equal to V2 and it is equal to V3. It means that the potential that is across power supply, it will be same as that of the potential across each of these lamps. That is given here that it is 110. So this is a value of the potential difference also across the power supply. So I write here it is 110 volt. Going towards the next part. Part B. Calculate the resistance of the filament of one of the lamps when working normally. Here we have to find out the value of resistance. So by using Ohm's law, that is V is equal to IR, we can find out the value of resistance. It is V over I. So the value of potential difference is 110 and current that we calculate it is 0.55. So that resistance comes to be 200 ohms. So resistance will be equal to 200 ohm. Part 2. Another lamp X has a filament with twice the resistance of each lamp in the circuit of figure 7.1. So there is another lamp whose resistance is double. The material and the temperature of the filament in lamp X is the same as that of the filament in the lamps in figure 7.1. In table 7.1, tick any box in the right hand column that shows a possible difference between the filament of lamp X and filament of one of the lamp in the circuit. So first of all, if I consider that filament that is used in the circuit has a resistance R. So there is another filament whose resistance is double. I write it as 2R. So this is new lamp and this is lamp in circuit. So there is a table that shows X has half the wavelength, X has twice the wavelength, X has 1/4 the area of cross section, X has half the area of cross section, X has 2 times the area of cross section and X has 4 times the area of cross section. So basically in this table there are two parameters, that is length and area of cross section. We know the formula of the resistance, that resistance depends upon length and cross section area, and it will be RL over A. So here resistance is double. So I just write here R is directly proportional to L and R is inversely proportional to area. So when resistance is directly proportional to length, so when there is double resistance, length also be double, because both of these are directly proportional to each other. It means that by doubling the resistance, length also double. So length will be twice. There is a second one. So second relation with cross section area, when we double the resistance, that is 2R, the area will be half, because resistance and area of cross section are inversely proportional to each other. So here is fourth column that shows that X has the half cross section, this one. So this is true. By doubling resistance, length is double, but the area of cross section will. Question number 8, part A first. Figure 8.1 shows a positively charged cube of insulating material. So the cube is positively charged. The cube is fixed to a piece of wood that is floating on water. A negatively charged rod is held above the piece of wood and brought close to the cube as shown. So here is the figure 8.1 and this is a cube that is positively charged, and this is a negatively charged rod that is placed above the piece of wood and it is brought close to the wood. State and explain any movement of the piece of wood. So in figure 8.1 we can see that the wood is positively charged while the rod is negatively charged. Both of these charges are of opposite nature. So opposite charges attract each other. That's why this wood will move in this direction, because it is attracted towards the negative charge. I write here a piece of wood the piece of wood moves toward negatively charged rod because opposite charges attract each other. So part 2, figure 8.2 shows two cubes of insulating material. So there are two cubes in figure 8.2. One is positively charged and the other is negatively charged. The cubes are fixed to a piece of wood that is floating on water. Charged rods are held above the piece of wood and brought close to the cubes as shown. So first of all, there are two cubes. One is positively charged while the other is negatively charged. And two rods are brought close to this cube. On positively charged cube, there is a negatively charged rod that is brought closer to this, while on the negatively charged cube there is a positively charged rod. So in the same case, there are opposite charges and these charges attract each other, due to which this piece of cube will move in this direction. This piece of wood moves towards the negatively charged rod, and this piece of wood will be attracted towards the positively charged rod. So both of these move in the opposite direction, so the wood will rotate. I write here. Here state and explain any movement of piece of wood. So in this case, the piece of wood will rotate. I write here, wood will rotate because two forces from the charged material create a turning effect. We can also see in figure 8.2 that on the left hand side the force is acting in downward direction because the negatively charged wood is attracted towards the positively charged rod, and on the right side the positively charged wood is attracted towards the negatively charged rod, and both of these forces are in opposite direction, so this forms a turning effect. Part B. In terms of a simple electron model, describe the differences between conductors and insulator. So, conductors contain large number of free conduction electrons, while insulators do not have free electron. I write here, conductors have a large number of free conduction electrons, while insulators don't have free electrons. In insulators, electrons are held in place. Part C. On figure 8.3, draw the electric field pattern around a single point positive charge. So here is a figure 8.3 and we can see that there is a single point positive charge and we have to draw the pattern of electric field lines. So first of all, we know that electric field line due to the positive charge is points outward. Now I am going to draw these lines using a ruler. So these are the electric field lines and all of these are points outward, which is due to the single point positive charge. Question number 9. Figure 9.1 shows a permanent bar magnet next to a circle that contains a coil and a galvanometer. So here is a figure 9.1 and we can see that there is a permanent bar magnet and it has two poles. One is north and second one is south pole. And we know that the magnetic field points from north to south direction. And this magnet is placed next to a circuit that consists of galvanometer. This is galvanometer and there is also a coil in this circuit. Part A suggests the metal from which the magnet is made. So this magnet is mostly made from steel. That is also a magnetic material. I write here it's a steel. Part B. The magnet is moved to the left and inserted a small distance into the coil. The galvanometer deflects briefly and shows that there is a current in the coil. Part 1. Explain why there is a current in the coil. So first of all, we can see in this figure that there is a magnet. Now I am going to draw some of magnetic lines here. These are from north to south pole. So these are the magnetic lines. When this magnet is moved towards the left, that is toward the coil, then some of these lines induces a magnetic field in the coil. So when there is an induced magnetic field in the coil, there will be the induced EMF, and due to this induced EMF, there is also the induced current that is detected by the galvanometer. So we can simply say that when the bar magnet is brought towards the left, then the coil cuts the magnetic lines of the bar magnet and induces the current. So I write here coil cuts magnetic field lines of the bar magnet and induces an EMF. So does induced current. Part 2. As the magnet is moving near the coil, end Q of the coil behaves as a magnetic pole. State the polarity of the end Q and explain why it has this polarity. So going back to figure, we can see that this is a north pole of the magnet, and when the magnet is moving towards the coil, then this north pole is moving toward the coil, so there will be the north pole of the coil, because coil tries to oppose the motion of this bar magnet according to Lenz's law. So north and north pole both repel each other. In this way, the coil opposes the motion of bar magnet that is moving towards it. This north pole will push the bar magnet away. So I write here, and Q is a magnetic north pole. opposes the movement of the magnet. To oppose. To oppose the movement of magnet. Part C suggests two ways in which the deflection of the galvanometer can be reversed. So we can reverse the deflection of galvanometer by moving the magnet in opposite direction. If we are moving, first of all, magnet is moving in left side, then we can move the magnet in right side so that the galvanometer deflection will be reversed. I write here, moving the magnet in opposite side, that is opposite direction. And second one is insert north pole in other end. So in both of these ways, galvanometer deflection can be reversed. Question number 10, part A. A detector of ionizing radiation measures the background count rate in a classroom where there are no radioactive sample present. The readings in count per minute taken over a period of time are shown in table 10.1. So there are counts per minute. First of all, it is 16, 12, 14, 16, 15 and 17. Part 1. State two possible sources of this background radiation. So the sources of background radiations are cosmic rays and soil, rocks, sun. So I write here cosmic rays, soil, rocks. All of these are the sources of background radiation. Part 2. Explain why the readings are not same. So here we have to explain that why the readings of counts per minute are different. It is due to the reason that random variation of background radiation. I write here random variation of background radiation. Part B. With no radioactive sample present, a scientist record a background radiation counts of 40 count per minute. He brings a radioactive sample close to the detector. The count rate increases to 200 counts per minute. So first of all, when there is no radioactive source, count rate is 40 count per minute, and when he brings a radioactive sample, then the count rate increases and it becomes 200 count per minute. After 24 days, the count rate is 50 counts per minute. Calculate the half-life of the radioactive sample. Here we have to find out the half-life. So first of all, initial radioactivity it will be equal to this count rate, that is 200. These are the initial count rate, that is with radioactive sample, minus the count rate without radioactive sample. So I write here 200 minus 40. So it will be 160 count per minute. Second thing, we also have to find out the final radioactivity. This final radioactivity is that when 24 days passes, the count rate is 50 counts per minute. So 50 counts per minute minus, when there is no radioactive source, count rate is 40. So it will be 10 counts per minute. Now I have to draw a table for count rate and half-life. So it is count rate and this is half-life. So when counts are 160, half-life is 0 because these are the initial count rate. When one half-life passes, then half of this sample decay and it becomes 160 divided by 2, it will be 80. So after 2 half-life, it will be 80 divided by 2. Half of the 80 counts per minute left. So it will be 40. Again after 3 half-life, it will be 40 over 2, that is 20. And after 4 half-life, it will be 20 over 2, that is 10. So after 4 half-life, count rate is 10. That is the final count rate. It means that 4 half-life passes. Here it is given that after 24 days, the count rate is 50 count per minute. So actually 24 days is equal to 4 half-life. So I write here 24 days is equal to 4 half-lives and 1 half-life will be equal to 24 divided by 4, that is 6. So 1 half-life is actually equal to 6 days. I write here 6 days.
Going towards the next part of this question. Part C. Draw a line between each type of ionizing radiation and its property and another line between the property and its use. One has done for you. So name of ionizing radiation. These are X's, alpha particles, beta particles and gamma rays. Here second column is property while the third column is use. So here we can see that X's can easily pass through soft living tissue. Calcium absorbs more than soft tissue. So X's has this property while it can be used to detecting the fractures in bone. So next, there is the first point that it is the most ionizing radiation and it is most easily absorbed. So the most ionizing radiation is actually alpha particle. Alpha particle has largest radiation than beta particle and gamma particle. So I draw a line here. Second point is penetration is affected by small change in the amount of solid it is passing through. So here penetration is affected by small change in amount of solid that is passing through it. So this is basically beta particles. Third one is it is highly penetrating and poorly ionizing. So the ray that has high penetration power and low ionization is actually gamma rays. So it will be gamma rays. Next, we have to link the property with uses. So first use is remotely detected leaks in underground water pipe. So beta radiation is used for this purpose. So it will be just like this. Third one is detecting smoke in a fire alarm system. So which is used in detecting the smoke in fire alarm system. It is basically alpha particles. So first of all, alpha particle is associated with first property. So I have to connect first property with this one. And last one is detecting a change in the thickness of aluminum foil during its manufacture. So this is basically whose penetration is affected by small change in amount of solid. So I join these 2 points. Just like this. So we have complete this diagram.